The Dr. Terri Show is presented by Evexias Health Solutions. Evexias Health Solutions is an emerging leader in the integrative medicine on a mission to positively impact people's lives through the transformation of healthcare. Evexias educates and trains practitioners on the new, innovative, integrative therapies that support a preventative care model that drives vitality as you age. You can learn more about Evexias Health Solutions and many of the healthcare topics we discuss on the Dr. Terri Show at Evexias.com. That's EVEXIAS.com, as well as find a provider near you. Now here's today's episode. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Dr. Terri Show. Today we're going to be talking with Dr. Matt McCormack again. He's back in the studio, and we're going to talk about this really epidemic of depression and anxiety and mental health disorders in our kids and teens. We're going to talk about some of the possible root causes of that and some of the ways that we as parents can help guide our kids into reversing some of that and maybe even getting off some of the medications that they might be on. So join us in the conversation with Dr. Matt today about anxiety and depression in our kids and teens. All right, welcome back, Dr. Matt. Thanks for just hanging out with us and doing a couple of shows, because what we're talking about is so important. And so many parents are looking for answers for their kids. And, you know, so many kids that transition into adulthood now are looking for answers for all the things they're dealing with now because of, all the childhood stress and trauma and, things like that they're dealing with. But I want to talk a lot today about this really epidemic of anxiety and depression, really, and mental health disorders in our young population. I mean, it's all across the lifespan now, and adults too, but let's focus on kids, because those kids are going to become adults, and, the conversation goes there. But, what are some of the things, I mean, we can name them off, but what are some of the things that are stressing our kids out?
Oh, that list can go on for a long time.
Oh, my gosh. I know.
In my world, I think that we talk a lot about devices, talk about expectations at school and posture and peer groups. I, as a chiropractor, always try and bring that back.
Every time I'm with you, I'm like, I need to sit up straighter, pop my back. Anyway, it's like, whoop. You said posture.
Posture, it makes everyone sit up straight when a chiropractor says posture. That's true. I think that as a chiropractor, though, I bring it back to the nervous system, right? All of those things are adding stress to the nervous system. And our body, at some level, will not distinguish whether that's a physical stress, an emotional stress, or a chemical stress. Right. Eventually, it all ends up in this big stress bucket, whether it's coming from, maybe friends at school that are causing some emotional stress, or the physical stress of posture or sports and things like that, or the chemical stress of what our kids are eating and exposed to. All of that starts to add up, and then our bodies just can't handle it as well as we want them to, right? And so on a nervous system level, we talked about before, that fight or flight system, that sympathetic nervous system is just given free rein to go, and it keeps going.
And we've talked about that, in some other shows with Dr. Laval, is the sympathetic dominance.
Yes.
And, I think just from some of our conversations and other conversations we've had, that it starts in the womb, right? With a stressed out mom. So let's just start there. Talk about stressed out mom and how that transitions to that baby.
Yeah, it certainly does. And that's the work that I've done learning from PX docs and training more in pediatrics over the past few years. You realize how early this sets in. And we talked about this on a different show, but we call it different things based on kiddos' ages. And I think we just need to step back from that model of giving them a diagnosis and a medication and then just waiting for the next diagnosis. We need to look at that kid as a whole, because the stress, you can trace that back probably to conception based on how that pregnancy goes. Was that a very difficult pregnancy? Did mom want to be pregnant? Was she in a supportive marriage at the time? All of that stuff plays into the very earliest development of that child's nervous system. Was she well supported at home? Does she have a stressful job? Like, what type of industry is she in? All of those things are just laying the foundation for that baby's nervous system, because baby is connected to mom, and any stress hormones and stress signaling that she is sending off for those 9 or 10 months are getting directly transferred to baby at a crucial time.
Right.
And then we've talked about it as well, when you go from that into what's getting more and more likely to be a somewhat traumatic birth, whether it's forceps or vacuum or a scheduled C-section or emergency C-section, which are happening so often.
Yep.
That also now physically is taking what's been there as emotional stress. Now we have a really crucial time of an intervention, which may or may not be life-saving and necessary at the time. That's going to be life-altering, because it's going to set that kid up with more likelihood of being in that fight or flight, sympathetic dominance, because we're putting so much strain and tension in actually biomechanically a really interesting way. The way with a cesarean or manual extraction or forceps, the way that practitioner is grabbing the head and distracting and rotating is exactly stressing the occiput, C1 and C2, the very upper levels of our neck, in a way that is going to alter nervous system function down the road. And that's where the vagus nerve is. That's where our centers for eating, sleeping, and pooping start. And if we are starting life with a stressful pregnancy, a stressful delivery, now physically stressful delivery, we are setting that kid up for what we have now coined as normal childhood challenges, which are common, but not normal. So that kiddo is now going into a childhood where, like my own childhood, where I had ear infections as a young kid, 1 to 2, I had several ear infections. You have enough ear infections, you're given enough antibiotics, which are a chemical stress. And eventually you're sent to an ENT once your pediatrician says, oh, we've done this a few times. Maybe you should go talk to the ENT. Ears, I had a couple rounds of tubes in my ears, which is literally like, putting a hole that's not supposed to be there. But it's not solving the root cause of the problem. It's not getting to the core of that stress for that kid. And then they keep going, right? And so now where the ears and the nose and the throat should be draining, now we're going to have a kiddo who still has that stress. I had tubes. Eventually, we see a lot of kids getting tonsils, adenoids removed, right? It just keeps moving down. And now you get to a 4 or 5-year-old who maybe has some upper respiratory infections or maybe has some asthma, which is becoming more common. The development of these kids, when you look at stress in such a crucial spot of the nervous system, it really lays the foundation for them to travel through life experiencing these challenges.
Layering on.
It's just layering on.
Yeah, for sure.
And that sympathetic dominance continues. Their body is trying to handle the stress in the only way it knows how, which is the way it knew how when it was first developing, which is the sympathetic dominant fight or flight. Everything is fear and anxiety and tense. And you do that for enough years, and you get to middle school, and you start to have maybe some devices and some peer pressure and friends. Now you have a kid that's been wound up for so long, eventually they're going to get worn out. And I think when we start to see those kids get worn out, now we see the mood disorders, the mental and emotional stress, depression, anxiety, really set up shop.
And then adding to that journey of stress, the stressors that I think sometimes in the spirit of wanting our kids to have a full life of all kinds of experiences, the pressure that we even sometimes put on our own kids and let's, do this sport and activity and let's do that. And, we're filling our days from, they're in school all day and then let's do tutoring after school. And then you got soccer practice after that. And then you got homework for 2 hours after that. And now you're so wound up, then we wonder why they can't sleep really well. And so, and then to your point, they get into the device age and man, I talk about that a lot in my book, just about how our brains and our nervous system wasn't designed to be constantly stimulated. And these devices that, and even as adults, we have access and we're constantly checking emails and we're constantly now social media kill me, just scrolling. It's, the eternal time suck, right? And so that has to add to those stressors.
Yeah, it certainly does. I mean, on a very foundational level, it's going to diminish their sleep. It's addictive by nature. Yes. They're not going to want to put those devices down. I've had to give up a lot of social media because I don't want to put those devices down, right? I mean, I think as parents, we always want to do the best for our kids. If we step back and we realize that not only are our kids constantly distracted, right? We call it ADD, ADHD, and we try and get them help, but our parents are distracted.
Yeah, we're distracted as adults, 100%.
I mean, it doesn't matter your age. It's so easy now to be plugged in and to be continuously distracted. Yeah.
So, and then, like you said, they hit the teenage years where now you have a whole, like us as kids without devices, or me, I'm older than you. There was already a lot of stress of being a teenager with peers and fitting in and figuring out who you are, and just all of that pressure is now compounding. Yeah. And now we see so many kids by the time they're 14, 15, on so many different medications. They're on a medication for their anxiety. They're on one for depression. They're on one to sleep. And here we go. And now we've created a polypharmacy adult because they become dependent on that. So, and I think this is where, your gifts, you can really step in and help some people. So kind of take us, we know how we got there, but how can we unravel from this stuff with our kids and our teens? And obviously the younger the better, but let's just say, you treat a lot of teens that are dealing with this. So tell me about a journey, the day in the life of Dr. Matt treating a teenager with anxiety and depression. And
I try and make the concepts there as educate. I always go back to education.
Sure.
Right? I mean, you can't want it more than they do.
Right.
You can't help them more than they want to be helped.
Right.
I think we all have a heart to help people, and we have a lot of knowledge, and I think educating them so they can understand it in a way that makes sense, and they can actually pick from that things that they will cling to give them motivation to seek the change. Back when in high school for me, I wasn't constantly plugged in. There was no social media.
Right.
I think we had a shared cell phone that I got to take when I went somewhere for a sporting event. But the connection to your peers at a vulnerable time is now 24/7.
That's right.
And that's a hard thing to get through as a young adult. I can imagine,
the rejection.
The rejection, if there's bullying, the judgment. I mean, it's 24/7, and it can be anonymous now, which is also super duper hard. But I talk to kids and parents, because it applies to younger kids too, about the idea of being in growth or protection. There's an author, Jonathan Haidt, who wrote The Anxious Generation, who talks about it as discover or defend. But basically making that sympathetic or parasympathetic side of the nervous system a little bit more understandable, right? Like the fight or flight versus rest or digest. If we talk about growth or protection, we can't be in both of those at the same time. We need our stressors to be as little as possible, which is impossible to get rid of all stress, but the best you can, right? So talking to teenagers about healthy sleep habits is a really important one. Posture is a big one, and sometimes posture is painful. Sometimes it's aesthetic. You got to figure out what that person is cued into and how you can best help them. But really, on the foundational level as a chiropractor, I'm also adjusting them and helping to take stress off their nervous system so they can get better sleep. So they can be a little bit more restorative when they wake up. They can feel more restored, I should say, when they wake up. So they're not always in that go, fight or flight, protected state where everything can just layer into fear and anxiety and stress. We need to break that cycle.
Yeah, for sure. And, and I think tough love from parents. My kids hated it when we made them leave their cell phones downstairs at night when it's time to go to bed. But if we didn't, they'd be on it all night. And then as teenagers, and I even remember getting lax, and then going in, and then they have this phone right next to their head that's pinging. Even when they're asleep, that light ping. People don't understand how powerful light pollution is to sleep and melatonin production. And melatonin is, I talked about this in another episode, but melatonin is powerfully anti-inflammatory. It's an immunomodulator. And when we are constantly light stimulated, we don't produce enough melatonin. Yeah. And these kids that are falling asleep with tablets, computers, watching TV, TV's on in the room, should not have a TV on in the bedroom, shouldn't have a TV in the bedroom at all. Yeah. But there's little things that I think we could do to mitigate some of this stress, right? So what are some things that you would suggest lovingly to parents and teens?
Well, I don't yet have a teenager, so
good luck.
We'll get there.
Girls.
We'll get there soon. Two girls. I think having boundaries and having a time, like almost a pre-bedtime routine that takes the screens out of the picture. Yeah. And I think if you educate them on the reasons as to why, because they really are plugged in all day long, and now even with school, I mean, a lot of the school day is done on the computer. Yeah. So it really can be, 18, 19 hours a day, 20 hours a day, depending how much sleep they want to get. But I think having a bedtime routine where the screens go out of the bedroom, away from the person for at least 30, maybe even 60 minutes before bed would be super helpful. And actually read a book or talk or play a game, something that is away from the screens.
It's engaging your brain actively instead of passively.
Exactly right. Yeah. And when we're scrolling, you're sitting there scrolling, your brain is just passive. It's on autopilot. And those apps are designed to keep you there. Yep. They make money on how much time they can keep you on those apps. So being able to set a limit as to how much they're on the screen, period, but also when they're going to bed, how much time before bed we give ourselves without looking at a screen. Yeah,
and adults too.
True.
I just started thinking when you said that, I remember learning, one of my kids at one point, we had to take the phone away and restrict them from social media for a while. And I remember she was so upset about it. But this is kind of funny. So she would get in the car, I'd pick her up from school, and she'd get in the car, and she was so chatty. Yeah. And she was talking to me, and we were engaging and having conversations. And she's like, you know what I noticed, Mom, since I don't have my phone is everybody's on their phones, and I'm just sitting there with all my friends, and they're just on their phones, and I'm sitting here going, hello, what about me, kind of thing. So I made her do, as part of her punishment, research on what social media does to the brain. Yeah. And she actually opened up a dialogue that was really interesting about dopamine. Okay. And this has so much to do with anxiety because every time you hear a ping or a like or see a heart, it's a dopamine hit, right? Yeah. And so kids are chasing these dopamine hits, and even adults are too, chasing these dopamine hits. But dopamine has a very short half-life. And then when you crash, if you can't keep getting that dopamine hit, that's one of the big things that causes a lot of this depression to kick in. Yeah. So I know neurochemically, there's got to be some conversation around what you do and some of these neurotransmitters in the brain. And what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think you're dead on, and we're also stepping much more into your world. But it's if our nervous system is constantly stressed out, if we're constantly seeking that next dopamine hit, and that's how we're getting that stimulation, and that's we are going to lose some of the foundational functions of the nervous system. We are not going to be able to fully function, like you're saying with your daughter, right? There's a difference from a teenager who's been on a phone all day and how engaged they are with the outside world versus one who hasn't been on the phone, right? And getting away from the phones makes such a big difference. Having a day away from the screens or having a weekend that's more for family and less for phones is so... the upside of that is so awesome because kids can now interact with their family units, with their siblings, and they become closer. But on a neurotransmitter level, if we are not functioning, if our nervous system is in that protective state and we're not in that growth state, then the neurotransmitters aren't working as effectively as they could, and we're not going to see our kids thriving the way that we want them to be.
Yeah. And it can be very dysfunctional.
It sure can.
What are some other things we've talked about? Distraction with devices, obviously, as ways to address this. One of the things that you really focus on is getting people off medications, getting kids off some of these medications, and maybe getting them off these antidepressants that were prescribed for anxiety and depression. And so, what are some other things that parents can focus on with their kids? Easy things you can do in the home. I mean, I hear parents like, they don't want to they don't want to upset their kids. I think sometimes we're trying to be too good of friends with our kids, and so we just let them, have their way and have their phone because we, want them to be happy. And to be frank, it's easier for us if we're not dealing with an angry teen. So there's a little work on our part as a parent, obviously. But what are some other things that they can focus on to help with this anxious, depressed state that we're seeing with these kids?
Yes, I think the easiest thing, which is hard initially, is to delay how early our kids are getting some of those personal devices, which is hard because so much of our schooling now is done on them, and so many other kids, especially younger and younger, are getting those devices earlier and earlier. But not getting a phone, especially a smartphone, as early as we're seeing kids get them now would eliminate some of those problems in the future. Because I think otherwise you need to get to a point where you're maybe not your kiddo's best friend. Yeah. And you are setting some hard limits around when maybe a personal smartphone is allowed and when it's not. Right. That is going to just lay the foundation for better family dynamics too, because you're going to have a kid that's engaged in the home with their family versus a kid who's always engaged in social media with someone out elsewhere. Right. Tough. So I think having hard limits is a good thing. I think finding a way for that kid, finding some other enjoyment that kid might, back that up. Finding something else that kiddo might enjoy, whether it be sports or a different in-person group where they can really get that social exposure, that social experience without it being anonymous through a screen. Yeah, it's actually face-to-face with somebody. I think that's what we're missing so much of.
Absolutely, community.
Yeah, and talking to kids in the office, especially those teenagers, the personal connection, the eye contact, being able to hold a conversation. We're seeing some of that stuff falter because they're not used to it. Right. So being able to get them in front of real people in a community setting where they can experience that is a great thing. Yeah, amazing. And even I think as parents, just being aware of how much we're not connecting face-to-face with our kids because we're so busy checking emails and, doing all that kind of stuff. That's one that I've really personally been working on the last little bit is putting the phone down. Yeah. My kids are they're 4 and 8. I don't want them to see dad distracted. Yeah. Right? There's nothing more important than them. And when we're in the same room, I try not to be checking my phone or having a barrier between them and me. And that would be a great one. I mean, lead by example. That's never a bad thing. Yeah. For mom and dad to have, a day when they don't use their phone or, at dinner table, the phone's not there. Things like that, which can be really simple, I think will probably make a big impact for the family. Hang up and hang out. That's what my girls got into. That's great. For a while. Yeah. They would all get together, one of my daughters as teenagers, and they'd all get together and put all their phones on the mantle so they could just hang out, or if they all went to dinner together, we'd all put our phones in the middle of the table. It's so important because you want your kid to know your face, not the top of your head, right? Yeah. So there's some responsibility and accountability, I think, on our part, too. Do you get much into, I know this is a little outside, but it all is together. Do you get much into the conversations around diet and gut and the contributors of what they're putting in and on their bodies to this conversation? I do to a degree, and then I refer them to someone who knows more than I do. It's super important. I mean, what we are eating or not eating plays such a huge role in that brain-gut connection. It can be pro-inflammatory. It can have a lot of chemicals. All those stressors lead to things that we see very commonly in our kiddos and our adults, constipation, IBS, things of that nature. So I try and plant those seeds, letting them know that stress in general on the body comes from 3 main buckets. This is chiropractic philosophy: trauma or physical stress, toxins or chemical stress, and thoughts or emotional stress. Yes. And I'm really good at what I do, but I'm not as good as others when it comes to diet and nutrition. So I certainly refer out, but just letting them know that plays such a big part, right? What types of sugary drinks, dairy, gluten, are you aware that those things might be pro-inflammatory? It's hard to change. Usually it takes mom wanting to change the household. Absolutely. So if mom's not on board, then I don't go too deep in that conversation. Yeah. But they'll do anything for their kids. Yeah. That's great. Yeah. And I love what you're saying about that. And even just, I think we make eating too complicated. Yes. Eat intuitively. Yes. I tell patients, if you can't
pick it, pull it, or kill it. You probably shouldn't eat it.
There you go.
And I don't mean pull it off the pantry shelf, and then, other dietitians that I've had on the show, are saying, shop on the outside aisles of the store, stay away from the inside aisles.
Yeah.
Meaning, no processed packaged food. I mean, these are just little tweaks and changes that I think we could make that would make, a huge difference in these kids. Any other, thing that we've missed or conversation around this epidemic of anxiety and stress in our teens? We've talked about the pressures we put on. We've talked about birth trauma and childhood trauma and stressful household and, even just when they get into the whole sports, and how many times are they hitting their head, that kind of thing too has got to be.
That takes its toll.
So
I think the other big area that I focus on is movement.
Yeah.
Our we as humans need movement.
Right.
And our society is constantly creating jobs and social situations where movement's not required.
Yeah.
So having a kiddo, I try and encourage kiddo. I have a kiddo right now who I've just been seeing the last couple of weeks who doesn't get outside and move. And we're just trying to encourage him, get some walking in, find something to do outside, because if you are not moving, we're not stimulating that neurospinal system. The brain's not getting some of that soothing movement and the endorphin release that it needs to get, and we are going to just layer on more stress and anxiety. Right. So movement's a big one.
In the anxiety and stress conversation.
Yeah.
Wow. How do you get a teenager that just wants to lay around up and moving? I mean, those habits start young though, right?
They do start young. Yeah. I think that's easiest when it starts young in a positive way. And I don't know that I have great, insights for someone whose teenager is unmotivated. Except maybe, set some short-term goals and see if they notice a difference in how they feel.
Yeah.
Right.
They have to want it too, like you said, but educating them that, it's a choice. You don't have to live this way the rest of your life, right?
Yeah.
Do you find that a lot of kids, when they finally get to you, are engaging in what you're having to say, or is it a lot of parents that are desperate dragging their kids in?
That's a great question. I think it's probably a mix of both. The younger kiddos are there because mom wants them to be there, right? The older adult, the younger adult, or like the high school kiddos, I think they start to realize that they could be doing better, right? And I think that my goal in that is to help them see that they can be doing better, and to look at things from a different perspective. When they come into our office, we look at health differently. Same thing you do in your office.
Right.
It's not, this is happening to you, you need this medication to help that. Like, this is something you can control, and giving the power back makes a big difference, because if they have never thought that they could control it, they're not going to take any steps to try and do better.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we've talked about a lot, so can you tell me again the website where listeners, if they want to find somebody that's been trained in these things like you've been trained, because we talked about this earlier, and this is something, so many people don't really realize, is that not all chiropractors are created equal, just like not all doctors and clinicians are created equal with what their training is.
Yeah.
And, we talked about the fact that there are a lot of really great chiropractors that may work on children, but there's a specialty area that may be better for certain children.
Absolutely.
Go ahead. Yeah.
You can go to 100 different chiropractors and get 100 different experiences, right? And that's not a bad thing. I actually think it's a really good thing. But for kiddos, especially with neurodevelopmental disorders like, ADHD, sensory, and even on the autism spectrum, it's certainly someone you want to seek out, someone who's had the reps in that and who is trained to work with kiddos like that. We know what we're looking for. We know how to work with them, and we know how to track their progress over time. And I think all those are really, really important when you're talking with a mom and a dad who are probably exhausted from seeking out so many other areas of the medical system.
Right.
Having someone who understands what that looks like and who understands their case history is really important. So pxdocs.com is where you can find a ton of resources, as well as a directory, and hopefully there's someone in their local area.
And for those listening that want to see or bring their kids to see you, Dr. Matt McCormack, you are here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area.
Yeah.
What's your website?
Pediatric chirocenter.com. We're right there in Colleyville.
Yeah. pediatriccirocenter.com. Well, thanks for being on again. I'm sure we'll have more conversations in the future, go a little deeper on some of these things. But a couple of key takeaways is peel it back to birth trauma. And a big takeaway for me, and I'm thinking about this through all my children's, childhood, is are they sleeping and pooping? Those are kind of like two key things that we really need to pay attention to. And if they're not, especially if they're little, they probably could definitely benefit from seeing somebody like you that can help with that nervous system and getting that adjusted right.
Yeah, they certainly could.
Yeah. Thank you so much for being here again. And we'll see you again.